It was the kind of moment that changed everything, the kind you'd see in a movie but never expect to live through. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Thompson slammed down his gavel, the sound echoing through the room like a thunderclap. My business partner, Alex Moore, looked over at me, his face pale, lips trembling. We'd been working for years, risking everything, and now it was all slipping through our fingers. A single slip-up, a series of miscalculations, and the tech giant we thought we could outsmart was ready to crush us. As the jury filed out, I couldn't help but think, was this really the end? All those sleepless nights, all the sacrifices, and yet, here we were, teetering on the brink. "We can still fight," I whispered to Alex, my voice cracking under the weight of our failure. But deep down I wasn't sure if we could. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Outside the world continued on, but in here it felt as though time had stopped. Alex Moore leaned in close, his breath shaky. "We're not done yet. We still have a chance," he whispered, though even his voice lacked conviction. The weight of his words hung in the air, but the reality was clear. Our backs were against the wall. We had no more options, no more resources to throw at the problem. The tech giant we had gone up against was too big, too powerful. "We're going to have to do something drastic," I said as my mind raced for any glimmer of hope. But what could we do? A small startup against a corporate empire with nothing left but our will to survive. I didn't know how, but I knew one thing for sure, this wasn't the end. "Whatever happens, we're going to fight," I said, more to myself than to Alex. The days following the trial were a blur. We continued to meet with lawyers, desperately trying to find a way out, but the odds were getting worse. It wasn't just the court case. The business was crumbling. Investors were pulling out, employees were leaving, and the once promising startup now seemed like a sinking ship. I could feel the walls closing in. One night, as I sat in my office, staring at the dwindling numbers on our financial reports, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw Sarah Patterson, our head of marketing, standing there with a look of quiet resolve. "We can still turn this around," she said, the conviction in her eyes sparking something deep inside me. She was the one person who never lost faith, even when everyone else was ready to walk away. "We have the product, we have the idea, and we have something they don't: passion." That was the moment I realized. The fight wasn't over yet. Maybe it never would be. The night was long, filled with phone calls and meetings. We were planning a final pitch, one that could make or break everything. I knew it was a long shot, but it was all we had left. The board of directors had already lost hope, but Sarah and I refused to give up. I paced the floor of the conference room, preparing myself for the battle that lay ahead. "This is our last chance," I told Sarah, my voice steady, but full of underlying fear. "If this doesn't work, we're done. I don't think we can survive another failure." She nodded, not offering comfort but understanding the gravity of the situation. We had one shot, and it had to count. "We're not done yet," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We fight until the very end." And with that, we prepared for the most important pitch of our lives. The following day, we stood in front of a room full of investors. It was a gut-wrenching moment. The odds were stacked against us. The competition had billions in their war chest, and we were down to our last few dollars. But as Sarah and I pitched, something clicked. For the first time in a long while, I saw hope in their eyes. "We believe in you," one of the investors said. "You're different, you have vision, and you have something that we don't see in the others: heart." That was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't about the money or the competition anymore. It was about the dream we were fighting for, and the people who believed in it. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Ethan Harris and Sarah Patterson worked tirelessly to refine the pitch. Every sleepless night, every meeting, every phone call was part of the effort to ensure our future. But even as we moved forward, the pressure was mounting. One evening, while reviewing the final version of our pitch, I received an unexpected call. It was from an anonymous number, the voice on the other end smooth, calculating. "We know what you're planning," the voice said. If you continue down this path, we will make sure you never succeed. The line went dead before I could respond. My heart raced. Who the hell was that? I muttered, turning to Sarah. She didn't have an answer, but the unease between us was palpable. It's not over yet, she said, though even her voice trembled. Was it a threat from the competition, or someone else who had a vested interest in seeing us fail? The next day, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder. Alex Moore tried to reassure me, but he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes either. We had come so far, but now it felt as though we were in over our heads. In the middle of a meeting, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. This time it read, "You'll regret crossing us. Your dreams will burn to the ground." My stomach dropped. The threats were escalating, and I couldn't figure out who was behind them. But then, as I sat back and tried to process, a thought hit me like a punch to the gut. What if the threat wasn't from a rival company? What if it was someone inside our circle, someone who didn't want to see us succeed? My mind raced, but the suspicion was too heavy to ignore. We need to find out who's doing this before it's too late, I told Sarah, determination fueling my every word. That night, Ethan Harris decided to take matters into his own hands. I knew it was a risky move, but if we were going to find the person behind these threats, we had to dig deep. Sarah Patterson and Alex Moore agreed to help, and we started going through every possible connection. We didn't want to admit it, but the person who had been threatening us had a personal agenda. It wasn't just business. The deeper we dug, the more we realized that one of our own had been compromised. Alex, our trusted partner, had connections to a major investor who might not have been as supportive as we thought. I confronted Alex the next day. The air between us was thick with tension. "What do you know about this?" I demanded, my voice low. He avoided my gaze, hesitating before finally admitting it. "There's someone I've been working with on the side. I didn't think it would come to this." My heart sank. It was a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. With the truth laid bare, we had no choice but to confront the situation head on. Alex Moore apologized, but the damage was done. He had been playing both sides, trying to appease investors, while secretly feeding information to a competitor. This wasn't just a business betrayal, it was personal. I felt like I had lost a brother. But there was no time for hurt feelings. We had a business to save. Sarah Patterson and I decided to confront the investor who had been behind it all, a major player in the industry, known for using ruthless tactics. The moment we entered the boardroom, his smirk told me everything I needed to know. "So you finally figured it out," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But it's too late now. You can't stop me." The words were chilling. "You've underestimated us," I replied, my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. We weren't finished yet. As the weeks passed, we found ourselves in an all-out war for survival. The threats didn't stop. In fact, they became more personal. But what truly shocked us was how the tables had turned. Alex Moore made the difficult decision to leave the company. He knew that the trust was broken, and he could no longer be part of a business built on dishonesty. The loss of a key player was devastating, but it was also a turning point. As we moved forward, I realized that this was our chance to reset. Sarah Patterson and I worked day and night to rebuild, rebranding the company and pitching to investors once again. It was a long shot, but there was a new fire in us. We were no longer the underdogs. We were contenders, determined to defy the giants who thought we were nothing more than a blip on their radar. "This is our moment," Sarah said, as we looked over the reworked pitch. And in that moment, I realized we had the heart, the drive, and the will to make it. No one could take that away from us. As we set out to rebuild, every step felt like an uphill battle. The giants were relentless. Despite the promises of new investments, our competition kept piling on the pressure. But the unexpected happened. A former client from the early days of our business reached out, offering a chance to partner. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep us afloat for a while longer. Sarah Patterson looked at me with that determined glint in her eyes. "We're not just surviving anymore," she said. "We're fighting back." And that's exactly what we did. We doubled down on everything that made us different. Our values, our vision, and our unbreakable spirit. It wasn't the first win we'd been waiting for, but it was the sign we needed to keep pushing. With the new partnership in place, we had enough capital to make another play. An aggressive marketing campaign that would put us in front of a larger audience. But just as things were starting to look up, the twist came. Alex Moore, the partner who had once betrayed us, reappeared. He contacted Sarah Patterson with an offer to return to the company with a stake in the new business model we were creating. His voice was smooth, almost apologetic, but I could see the underlying tension in Sarah's face when she spoke to him. "You know we can't trust you, right?" she said over the phone. "You had your chance." The betrayal ran deep, but there was something else in his words that made us hesitate. What did he know that we didn't? Could we afford to leave him out of this new chapter? We met with Alex Moore the next day. He showed up in a sharp suit, the same confident aura that had once convinced me he was the right partner. But this time, it was different. The air was thick with the tension of his past betrayal. "I've learned my lesson, Ethan," he said, looking me directly in the eye. "I can help you get this to the next level. I have connections that you need." I wanted to believe him, but the scars of his past actions were still too fresh. Sarah Patterson didn't trust him, and I wasn't sure I could either. But there was something unsettling about Alex's calm demeanor. Had he really changed, or was he trying to worm his way back into our good graces for personal gain? After several tense meetings, we made a decision. Alex Moore would not be part of our future. He left with a cold handshake and a promise not to interfere again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid. Sarah Patterson and I agreed that we couldn't let his reappearance distract us from our mission. We had to focus on the next big pitch, a meeting with investors who could take us to the next level. As the days passed, everything started to feel like it was falling into place. The new business model was coming together, and we had finally developed a strategy that was starting to look promising. But I couldn't ignore the nagging suspicion. What if Alex Moore was working with the enemy all along? What if his return wasn't just a mistake? The day of the pitch arrived, and everything seemed poised for success. The investors sat across the table, ready to hear our new vision. Ethan Harris took the lead, presenting our ideas with the passion and drive that had gotten us this far. But as the pitch went on, the investors' expressions remained unreadable. Suddenly, one of them spoke up, asking a question that caught us off guard. "How do we know you can sustain this model?" The room went quiet. This was the moment of truth. Sarah Patterson stepped in, addressing the concern with grace and conviction. But I could see the doubt in their eyes. The weight of our past failures, the pressure to prove ourselves, it all came crashing down. This was our last chance, and everything depended on it. The pitch didn't go as planned. Ethan Harris felt the weight of their doubt in his chest. It was the hardest moment yet, staring at investors who didn't believe in him, not because of the idea, but because of the uncertainty surrounding the team's past. Sarah Patterson caught his gaze and nodded subtly. "We're not done yet," she whispered. And she was right. We weren't done. As we walked out of the meeting, we knew we had two choices: walk away defeated, or fight with everything we had left. I looked at Sarah. The fire in her eyes told me everything. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the end of that week, things took a sharp turn. Alex Moore appeared again, this time not offering to join the company, but with a different proposal, a hostile takeover. He had acquired a significant number of shares and was trying to pressure Sarah Patterson into selling. "You've done well, but it's time to accept reality. You'll never be able to compete with the big players. Sell while you still can," he said with a smirk. The audacity of it hit like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just business. This was personal. Sarah Patterson stood her ground, her voice steady as she replied, "You're wrong, Alex. We're not selling, ever." In that moment, something shifted. We were no longer just fighting for survival. We were fighting for our soul. The next few days felt like a blur. Ethan Harris and Sarah Patterson spent hours meeting with their lawyer, trying to find a way out of the mess Alex Moore had created. Every plan we'd built was now at risk of crumbling before us. I remember the moment we realized that there was no way out without a fight. The pressure was immense. "We have nothing left to lose," Ethan said, looking at me like he was preparing for war. "If we're going down on our terms." And that's when we decided to take the ultimate risk, expose the corruption Alex Moore had hidden for so long. It was a gamble, but if we didn't act now, we would never have the chance again. We made our move. We went public with the story of Alex Moore's deceit, exposing his shady dealings and the underhanded tactics he had used to undermine us. The media picked it up quickly, and soon the world knew about the betrayal. But it didn't go as we expected. Alex Moore wasn't just a competitor, he was a manipulator with the power to destroy reputations. His response was swift and ruthless. He filed lawsuits, discredited every piece of evidence we had, and turned public opinion against us. The battle wasn't over, it was just beginning. Sarah Patterson clenched her fists as she read the latest smear campaign in the press. "We'll never back down," she muttered, and I knew then that we were in this for the long haul. The next few months were a blur of meetings, public relations nightmares, and the constant feeling of being in survival mode. We fought back every accusation, every lawsuit. But there was something else we hadn't expected: the support. Despite everything, our customers, employees, and even some competitors started rallying behind us. They saw the truth, that we were underdogs, but we were fighting for something real. And that was when we realized this wasn't just about a business anymore. It was about everything we stood for. We had the chance to turn this around, but it would take every ounce of determination we had left. "We're not going to stop," Sarah Patterson said, looking at me with fire in her eyes. "Not until we win this." It was do or die. Sarah Patterson and I had reached the final stage of our battle, the moment we'd been preparing for. Alex Moore had played his cards, trying to bankrupt us with legal threats and media manipulation, but we weren't going down without a fight. We had one last chance, an open court hearing. It was our opportunity to reveal the truth, expose Alex's corruption for the world to see, and finally clear our names. But there was a twist we hadn't anticipated. A last-minute piece of evidence came in from an anonymous source. The letter in my hand was a game changer. If this document was real, Alex Moore wouldn't just lose the case, he'd lose everything. And he knew it. I could see the panic in his eyes when we walked into the courtroom. The stakes had never been higher. The trial was underway, and the tension in the room was unbearable. Alex Moore's defense was fierce. He had lawyers, publicists, and all the resources he needed to spin his lies. But we had one thing he didn't: the truth. We presented the evidence, piece by piece, watching the courtroom shift as the weight of Alex's deceit became undeniable. Sarah Patterson stood before the judge, her voice steady, but her eyes burning with resolve. "This isn't just about money. This is about integrity. It's about what's right, and we have the proof," she declared. The room went silent, and I saw the first signs of cracks in Alex Moore's perfect facade. Then came the moment of truth. Alex Moore took the stand, ready to defend himself. But something was different. He didn't seem as sure of himself anymore. As the prosecutor cross-examined him, the lies started to unravel. Every question, every answer, seemed to tighten the noose around him. Then came the bombshell. The document we had revealed. It was irrefutable proof of his underhanded tactics, his manipulation of the company's finances, and his illegal dealings with other corporations. He tried to play it off, but his confidence had shattered. "You can't silence the truth, Alex," Sarah Patterson said quietly, her words cutting through the courtroom like a blade. The trial seemed to stretch on forever, but we could feel the tide turning in our favor. We'd exposed everything: Alex's fraudulent actions, his attempts to ruin our company, and his secret dealings. The jury was quiet, absorbing the evidence. We had them on the ropes. The final arguments were made, and the jury was dismissed to deliberate. Sarah Patterson and I stood together outside the courtroom, the weight of everything finally hitting us. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time we had hope. "We did it," Sarah said softly. And for a moment, it felt like we had already won. The jury returned their verdict that afternoon. The room was tense as the judge read aloud. Alex Moore was found guilty on all counts of fraud and corporate malfeasance. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming, but there was no time to rest. This wasn't just a victory in court. It was the beginning of something bigger. The press was already calling, and investors were eager to back us. We had done it. We had defied the giants. Sarah Patterson stood tall beside me as the world began to take notice. But this was just the start of a new chapter. "Let's take this further," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. And I knew, then, that the real journey was only beginning. The courtroom victory was just the beginning. The press was relentless, and every outlet in the country wanted a piece of Sarah Patterson and me. Our startup, once a struggling dream, was now the symbol of resistance against corporate giants. Investors flooded in, eager to be a part of what we'd created. But with the attention came pressure, and suddenly, everyone had an opinion. Sarah Patterson kept pushing forward, reminding me that we had a vision to realize. But I could see the weight on her shoulders. We weren't just trying to survive anymore. We were about to lead a revolution in the business world. As the media frenzy grew, so did the challenges. Sarah Patterson and I were invited to speak at countless conferences, and the pressure to deliver on our promises mounted. We were no longer just business owners. We were the face of a movement. Alex Moore had been defeated, but the giants were far from gone. We still had to take on corporate corruption, the very system that had tried to bury us. Every decision felt magnified, and with each step forward, we questioned whether we were truly ready for what lay ahead. But Sarah was unwavering, always reminding me, "This is our time. Let's show them what we're made of." It wasn't just the press or investors we had to worry about. The deeper we dug into the world of corporate giants, the more we uncovered alliances, dirty deals, and loopholes that kept them in power. The higher we climbed, the more dangerous the world became. Sarah Patterson had become a target in the industry, with anonymous threats sent to our office. It was clear that there were still those who would stop at nothing to see us fail. But each time they tried to tear us down, we only grew stronger. The truth was our greatest weapon, and Sarah knew it. "They can't silence us now," she said, her voice steady and fierce. Just as the pressure seemed unbearable, an unexpected ally stepped forward. Victor Clark, the CEO of a competing startup, reached out with an offer to collaborate. It was a risky move, one that could either catapult us to new heights or destroy everything we had worked for. But Victor had a history of challenging the status quo, and his offer was genuine. Sarah Patterson and I met with him in a private meeting, weighing the potential benefits and risks. Victor was charismatic, and his vision aligned with ours. "Together, we can change the game," he said. And for the first time in months, I felt a spark of optimism. The collaboration with Victor Clark proved to be a turning point. With his company's resources and expertise, we were able to scale our operations faster than we had ever imagined. Sarah Patterson and I stood at the helm. But now we had a stronger team, a wider network, and a clearer vision. As we expanded, we made sure to remain true to our roots, to the values that had brought us this far. "We're not just here to win. We're here to change everything," Sarah said, her voice filled with determination. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. We were no longer underdogs. We had become giants. Our startup had grown into a multi-billion-dollar company, and now we had to lead, not just survive. Sarah Patterson looked at me, steady in her resolve. "We've done it, Ethan," she said. It felt surreal. The media and investors never stopped, but we stayed true to our vision. Sarah and I, now leading the way, faced every challenge with confidence. "We didn't just survive, we thrived," she reminded me. Alex Moore reached out, admitting his defeat. He had underestimated us, and we had become the future. "We've moved on," I said, realizing how far we'd come. Our success had redefined everything. Victor Clark called with a game-changing opportunity. We were chosen to lead an industry coalition. But taking on a global giant was a massive risk. Sarah Patterson was resolute. This is our moment. As we prepared for the final battle, I realized that we weren't just building a company, we were building a legacy. Sarah Patterson looked at me with fire in her eyes. We built a legacy,